preventable tragedy on Lake Pickering. Now, to open this up here tonight, this isn't the first time I've been here before the city council, and it probably won't be the last. But this time I was asked in by the city council to examine what exactly had happened with the most recent mass fish death and find out just what exactly is going on. I found out a lot, but some of the esteemed members of the council probably will not like me for it. And really, that's okay, because I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to give you facts. So, going over everything this evening, we'll be going over what exactly happened with the fish, what toxins were found, because yes, there was more than one, the research I conducted, some further digging deeper, and final thoughts on the matter. When I was asked by the City Council to investigate this matter, I was both saddened and stunned. However, I can't say I was shocked, as I have spoken at length that changes needed to be made. It breaks my heart that it has come to this, but now I hope you will listen. While home to a booming tourism industry, Lake Pickering was first home to a thriving ecosystem of fish. I remember coming here every summer as a child with family friends to learn about the wonderful treasures we had been entrusted to guard, and seeing how badly we have failed the ecosystem, the fish of this lake, the ecosystem, our children, our grandchildren. It's a tough pill to swallow for everybody involved. Then and now, we were always told to leave a place cleaner than when we found it. The older I've gotten, the less this seems to be the case, as more and more tourists have begun treating the lake as their personal garbage can with no thought or care to the damage they're doing. In 2006, I urged the City Council to impose fines on tourists caught littering or leaving anything that was a danger to the environment. I was ignored then, and even efforts from our local Girl Scout troops have not been enough to stem the tide. The toxins. This mass death could have been prevented, both by action when I urged it, and by taking greater care when several buildings nearby were remodeled in the spring of 2000. Having done testing on the paint, I learned that there is arsenic in that paint that was used, and it has been steadily peeling and poisoning the lake water for years. There is also a pocket of naturally occurring arsenic on the western side of the lake. That it's not health matters, but you could say it's the lesser of two evils, because naturally occurring organic arsenic is less toxic than inorganic arsenic, found in the paint on the old schoolhouse most specifically. However, I discovered a second toxin, and this one's much more dangerous. Dioxin is only used in a small handful of purposes, one of them being paper bleaching. When I looked at the DWP water plans, I can't say I was shocked to find that the pipes from the water bleaching plant run directly into the lake, and they are made of substandard materials as it is, which has caused even further problems. And another instance of where dioxin occurs is in chlorine. In 2003, I spoke here then about using more environmentally friendly means to keep the lake clean, and sadly I was unfortunately ignored. Now, to take a break from all this quote by Walt Disney that I thought was rather apt for this evening. The way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. if we had done more when I urged it, we wouldn't need to be here talking tonight, sadly. Some of my research. I conducted necropsies on several different species of fish. So far, I had found salmon, I have found trout in the lake. Obviously, there's a booming fishing industry. We also have people here in town who have taken fish that they were not properly equipped to house, such as the bottlenose plecostomus, and they have turned them loose in the lake. Ryukyu goldfish. It's a hodgepodge that if it would have been left alone and there not been interference, they would have gotten things would have, from what I could see, everyone was adapting, which sometimes is not always the case. The necropsies were what led me to test for the chemicals. Every single one of these fish had a massive failure of their ATP process, or more widely known as adenosine triphosphate. As you can see in my handouts, this is a big problem. Without their ATP processes functioning as they should be, the fish cannot survive, nor can humans for that matter if nothing is done. Tourists will start dying come winter, and it will be to our esteemed elected leaders people will look to for answers. Energy is stored and utilized by cells using ATP. Remember those three letters that arsenic and dioxin mess with? As you see on the handouts, without ATP, the organism cannot live. A car can't be driven without gas or an engine, and neither can a fish survive without ATP. See, together, to give, for those who may be just joining us, together, both of these toxins are both hazardous to the environment, hazardous to humans. They get together and they block ATP receptors, which is a very, very, very big problem. Digging deeper, what arsenic and dioxin together can cause? One of these alone is bad enough, but two together? I had a hunch something further was going on. So, one night, after I had wrapped up another series of necropsies, and I seemed to be hitting a brick wall, I had a thought of, I wonder something. So, got in the car, went down to the 24-hour Walgreens, and I picked up a blood glucose meter. There had been a few fish that had just been brought into me that morning who had passed away the previous night. So those were probably about as fresh as I was going to get, unless I went down to the lake and sat there waiting for another fish to pop up dead. Whenever I returned, I started drawing blood samples and did several glucose tests among the fish. Didn't matter the species, didn't matter the size. Every single one of those fish had a blood glucose reading of 800 and up. Nothing was under 800. Now, for those of you in the audience who have diabetes, you know how serious this is. However, for those of you who don't, let me give you another point of reference. Yes, sometimes for humans, that sort of blood glucose reading is nearly almost always fatal. There's been maybe one or two people in 20 years who have survived a blood glucose reading that high, and one of them's actually been my mother. And another one of them, whenever we get into the canine variety, my very first dog, he was also diabetic. And his was even higher than that. So that speaks to just how severe a blood glucose reading that high would be. I would think that maybe you might see it in smaller fish, but even some of the half a foot to a foot long Plecostomus, same thing, every single one over 800. So I realized these fish all had another thing in common. Every single one of them were diabetics. You've seen diabetes in the news, or you have a family member or friend who's been touched by it. Diabetes mellitus, or type 2, is when the body cannot produce enough insulin. In this instance, these fish, when their ATP, or cellular energy, was taken away, they had a catastrophic failure in multiple organ systems, which is something you would only typically see with a diabetic whose sugar has been uncontrolled for years. We're talking their normal is 500 to 700 for their blood sugar. And whenever I was much younger, I actually had a few friends of the family who had that. And eventually they would end up in the hospital and they would start to go into multi-system organ failure, which is in essence what happened with these fish. They went into multi-system organ failure because of complications from diabetes. But humans and fish can have differing complications, which I'm going to get into here coming up next. What this means for us. For humans, here's some side effects. Some simple ones and some gnarly ones. Excessive thirst, frequent urination, loss of feeling in the hands or the feet. That's diabetic neuropathy, blackening digits, necrosis, organ failure, blindness, and eventually death. Some do's and don'ts. Do eat right. Do be seen by your doctor at least twice a year or more if you have a family history of diabetes. Do take note of any unusual symptoms. Do wear protective breathing gear if you were exposed to dioxin, because I see we do have a few members of the audience who I recognize from the paper bleaching plant. I would definitely suggest we get these young men and women some N95 masks and respirators with fresh oxygen as soon as possible. Do be mindful of what you throw away and where. Don't just dump your drinks in the lake because it's convenient. That's my very first don't, in fact. Don't throw your drink in the lake. Don't thrive solely off of high sugar and fattening food. Because going back to the throwing the drink in the lake, that whenever diabetics aren't supposed to drink sugary foods, and that includes fish. Don't try to push through it. Wives, you've seen your husbands do it. You know what I mean. For the kids, don't eat any paint chips you find lying around. And finally, don't say it's not my problem. It is everyone's problem if we want to have a lasting legacy. Final thoughts. While preventable, nothing can undo the past or bring back the fish that were lost in this senseless tragedy. However, if we work together for the good of the lake and our town, we can ensure a lasting legacy for all. My special thanks to Paige. You can read that at your leisure. And I'd like to thank you for your time this evening. If you need to reach me, my email is on screen, savethefish1@gmail.com, or go to the lake's website and hit the contact us button. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you again.